Attention, all personnel. Protocol 13 is now in effect. Repeat, Protocol 13 is in effect.
That's right, you are here. Protocol 13 has been activated and has brought you here to the Marauders Guild for episode 2 of the Protocol 13 podcast. Once again, I'm joined by my good friend Logan.
Hi, I'm Logan.
And we are going to be covering everything Mandalorian. That's right, season 3 just wrapped up this past week as we're recording this. And the finale, I think we can both agree, amazing.
It was really great, honestly.
Pure Star Wars. I made a video on the channel. I just said this was Star Wars at its best, and I can admit some people did have mixed emotions about the feelings, but it's Star Wars. It's not Star Wars if it's not mixed emotions about it.
Exactly. I personally felt it was pretty solid. It felt like if season 1 and season 2 had a baby. It was his own voice, and that's what I really liked about this season, honestly.
Exactly. So, with that being said, we're going to be covering that today, giving our review of the entire season, giving predictions for what we can see, not only in a possible season for the Mandalorian, but also the ties it could have to future shows like Ahsoka, which is coming in August. And then we'll try to talk about some other topics later down the line as well. We, of course, have Jedi Survivors coming out within a couple days of us recording this. So by the time this episode drops, it will be out. So we might talk a little bit about that. And there's some other bits of information that we might cover as well. We'll kind of see as the episode progresses. But let's talk about it. Let's just dive right in. Mandalorian Season 3, the finale, Chapter 24, The Return. In this episode, we saw the build-up of what Bo-Katan was doing. She was getting Mandalore back together. She brought the Covenant back. She brought her Night Owls back together into the fold. She even had Mandalorians that survived the initial purge that came in and helped fight the Empire. And of course, we can't be remiss in talking about who they fought against. Moff Gideon, who showed up in full Beskar final stage Dark Trooper armor, as he called it. First, I want to get your reactions to Moff Gideon showing up in that armor. What was your thoughts when he like? I gotta say, it showed up as a badass with that armor.
He looked amazing. I've seen people saying that it looked like a cross between like a Boba Fett and a Darth Vader. And I honestly can't agree more with that statement. It's mechanical, yet it's still traditionally Mandalorian because of the Beskar and just you have the traditional molds and stuff that Mandalorians use. And I think it's a perfect way of what Moff Gideon would do when he got his hands on Beskar. And now that he had the unlimited resource of Mandalorian Beskar, I'm honestly wondering if there's more than just that one suit out. You know,
that's a good thing to think about because, I feel like with Gideon, and especially with what we've seen in this finale, you can't really say yes, this is exactly what he was doing because now we know. One of the things we also got, because kind of like bleeding into the conversation, is the clones. We know that he had clones, and I feel like no one knows. And we can say, those were all the clones that were destroyed when Din Djarin and Grogu found them. But we can also say, who's to say there aren't other clones already out there? Who's to say that Moff Gideon we saw wasn't a clone?
Exactly.
I want to talk about this. I know we're going to review the entire finale, and then we want to try to talk about the season as well. But I think that we have to talk about this. We have to talk about a few theories that arose because of this episode. Before we kind of get back into it. So one of the first things I want to kind of touch on is the idea that the Gideon we saw is a clone. So like, as I mentioned, we saw that he does have clones in himself, and we saw one open his eyes. So we at least know that they were functioning clones. We were to the stage where the clones could function at least. And one thing I kind of found was interesting, I saw some people note on it, Gideon looked a bit different than the last time we saw him.
He did look a bit different. The notable difference a lot of people point out is the loss of the mustache, the facial hair. I noticed he was a little bit more gray. But honestly, I chalk that up to stress. I mean, he's lost twice now to the Mandalorian, and it just seems like he from all we knew, he was the last Imperial. He was the last one. Obviously, there's the small warlords and stuff like that, but from what we know as viewers, he's the only one capable of actually doing anything at the moment. At least from what we see from not reading, going too far into the books and all that.
Yeah.
Though I think the stress really got to him. The stress of being the call me corny, the heir to the Empire. I feel like the stress really would have held up against him, and I feel like it would have taken a huge toll on him, and I feel like that's why he might have looked different.
See, I can agree with that sentiment, but then there's also the detective part of me that wants to look way more into this than I have to. But it's kind of on the heels of what you said with the heir to the Empire, as we know Thrawn, who did get name dropped quite a bit over the course of this finale as well. As you mentioned, we know that there are other Imperial warlords, but now we know these warlords, or we say that with quotations now, because they're not really warlords. They're still an assembled empire. They're just pretending to be warlords, which is a Thrawn strategy through and through.
Oh, of course. I really liked that scene in its own. Just made it, that made me pop. That made me get excited because I really like the idea of these smaller tribes of the Empire, all with their different ideals. And one of my favorite things in Star Wars is seeing how like humble and cocky the officers and admirals of the Empire really are. And now that they have nobody there to really tell them what to do, it's gonna get crazy. And that scene alone was amazing.
It shows you because it's like, yes, it shows you really how much control Palpatine had over these guys. Because we've always read, you know, if you read books, if you in some of the shows, you know that Imperial moffs, officers, admirals, whatever have you, there was always that sense of, I need to further my career and I will step on you if it takes that to happen. Right? We see that. But I feel like there was always something on the top brass, on the top shelf, that let them know they can't do that because somebody's going to come down on them. And we saw that a little bit with within Rebels, when you saw people like, what was his name? He was under Captain Constantine. I don't remember in Star Wars Rebels. Captain Constantine, who basically pulled an Icarus and flew too close to the sun, wouldn't listen to Grand Admiral Thrawn, wouldn't back down when the Admiral said, don't get out of line. And it cost him his life. He lost his cruiser, lost himself. And it's kind of funny that Thrawn is that kind of the key point of that as well, because I'm really referring to Palpatine as a whole. Like, a lot of these officers knew Palpatine was at the top. So if you overstepped your boundaries, you knew Palpatine was going to be the one to put you back in line. But now that we don't have Palpatine, and yes, Thrawn is kind of like that person now. But the interesting thing to note, as we saw during that little council meeting, I guess you can call it, is nobody has actually seen Thrawn. Nobody in this council, or this heir to the Imperial throne, I guess you can call it. No one here has really seen the Grand Admiral. So to say that there is some resentment to follow somebody who they've never seen is an understatement. We saw that with Gideon. Gideon really, he said what everybody wanted to say. He wanted to say, no one has seen Thrawn. No one is willing to grab the reins of the Empire by the hand and lead it like it should be written. And that's kind of interesting to me, because I'm like, oh, so that kind of shows you that, yes, Thrawn has a plan, and it has its good parts, but still has its bad parts, because you cannot trust the egos. But I want to say one thing when it comes to Thrawn, and when it comes to the cloning, because I want to get back to that theory here for a second too, is the very good possibility that I kind of considered is, yes, that Gideon could have been a real Gideon. But let's say it was a clone. Let's say that clone was this is what I want to base it off. So keep in mind when Gideon was fighting Mando, he said all those clones were the best parts of him amplified, right? So let's say that one of his best parts is egotism. So that particular clone, he says, yes, this is my best part amplified. So his best part is his egotism, is his self-righteousness, and all the things that kind of create a selfish attitude. So then this Moff Gideon thinks he's the one that's destined to rule the Empire. And maybe, just maybe, the real Moff Gideon is actually with Grand Admiral Thrawn.
I thought about that. Here's my thing. I feel like Moff Gideon is way smarter than we may think he is. Like, we know he's smart, but we might be thinking, oh, he's the villain. He's the antagonist. He's got to mess up somehow so our heroes can win. I was thinking, if that was a clone, where would the actual Moff Gideon be? And also, why would Moff Gideon only clone in one place? Like, I feel like that would be something you would want to spread into multiple parts for contingency. I really thought about that after watching the episode, and I really do think, now that you bring it up, that he could very well be with Thrawn. I feel like that's a very good possibility.
Because for me, what's the way to put it? It harkens me back to the Force Unleashed 2. I don't know if anybody remembers that storyline, but in particular, that game, we saw Vader was trying to clone the perfect clone of Starkiller from the first Force Unleashed game. And then if you play the dark side ending, one of the things you find out is Vader secretly had a perfect clone the entire time. So what if this is the case here, where Gideon secretly had a perfect clone the entire time, and Thrawn knew this, or at least Thrawn said, "Oh, how many clones does Gideon has? Is one at least able to be released?" They said yes. Thrawn at this point says, let us reclaim the real Moff Gideon, and then let's put the clone out there.
I especially think I agree even more now with that, because thinking that using a clone and then knowing the clone was going to perish, and having the Mandalorians and the New Republic have that sense of relief because Moff Gideon's gone, for what they know. They're gone. You know, now all they have is these unorganized warlords that are gonna fight each other. You know, that's smart, and I feel like that's something that I would see being played out of Thrawn's playbook.
Exactly, and then you also have to keep in mind, there's still the idea of, like, does the New Republic still trust Mandalore? Because keep in mind, yeah, they defeated Moff Gideon, but they don't know who freed Gideon.
They don't.
They that answer is not really there. I mean, and the Empire had Beskar soldiers, all of this kind of stuff. But to them, that's not enough to say, yeah, that's who freed Gideon. He could have been freed by them or brought to them. It could have been other Mandalorians who were still working with him. Like, the idea of who broke Gideon out is still a very highly contentious question, if you ask me. Something that can still be explored and still be worked on. And furthermore, this is one more thing I want to throw out there that I was thinking on. So we know the armor. She smashed a lot of doubts, both literally and metaphorically, during this finale. But for me, she didn't. And I'm going to tell you why she didn't smash any doubts. Because yes, she was there to fight with Mandalore. But one thing that happened, I was like, that was really cold for no reason, is when Din Djarin wanted Grogu to take the Creed. And she kind of snapped and she shut down at it. Yes, like she shut down at it. And one of the things that was interesting to me is, think back a couple more episodes when Grogu was doing like the little training sparring sessions with the other apprentices. And they said, no, he can't do it, too young to speak the Creed and all this kind of stuff. But she was like he still knows it, so he can still do it. So it's kind of interesting to me for her to say, oh, he can do this, even though he can't speak the Creed, but he can't take the Creed. And it's like, that was interesting. It's like, why did she get cold all of a sudden to Grogu? And it seems like she was shocked when Din Djarin took him on as his adopted son. And it felt to me, it was like, oh, there's like parts of this plan that she didn't want happening. Now, the reason I'm saying this is a lot of people like to say that she was the spy for Moff Gideon in that episode, The Spies, because as we know, it was called The Spies. We only saw one, and plural. But what if she wasn't a spy for Moff Gideon? What if she was a spy for Grand Admiral Thrawn? And still is a spy for Grand Admiral Thrawn?
She very well could be. I think that Bo-Katan coming in, especially eventually with the Darksaber and everybody rallying around her, I would have, if I was the armor and these people were following me and then all of a sudden they want to follow her, I'd be a little jealous. And especially with the theories of her being Rook Cast who fought with Maul to take Mandalore.
That would actually be kind of cool.
It would be even, it'd make even more sense on why she'd be power hungry and want to rule over the coverts and eventually all of the people. So I feel like a another Mandalorian Civil War could actually be started based off of that storyline there. I think it'd be pretty cool.
It's interesting for me. It's a good plot line, but also it makes it interesting because now Thrawn, if she is this like based on my theory, if she is a spy for Thrawn, Thrawn now has a seat on the Mandalorian throne in a sense. Because for me, it's kind of obvious that if Bo-Katan is going to rebuild Mandalore, she might be taking on the armor as like a confidant or an advisor or some kind of role similar to that, right?
Yeah.
So if Thrawn has the advisor, the armorer who is now the advisor, in his back pocket as well, it's not just an idea of, oh, he'll know all the things they're doing. It's the idea of, oh, he can influence the things they're doing. It's almost similar to Maul's Shadow Collective that we saw him building in which coincidentally was with Mandalore again. But it's very similar to the Shadow Collective when Maul was building in Clone Wars. Like, before he got to that level of power where he was just openly ruling it, he had that mold that was on the inside that he could influence to get that person to make the choices that was necessary for him to be able to step in himself. So I think I want basically the whole idea I want to get to with that little theory is do not trust the armor just yet. Just because she smashed a couple heads in does not mean
she's so cool.
She's cool, but like don't trust her because like keep in mind, yes, she might be a spy, or yes, she's Mandalorian and she might be proud Mandalorian, but those were just stormtroopers to her. She was gonna smash their heads in regardless. That's not enough for me to say, oh, she proves she's good. If she is willing to not do anything to Bo-Katan in any kind of way, if she does not harm her in any kind of way, if there's an obvious moment where she could take her out and she does it, that's when I'm like, okay, I'll trust her. But for right now, like I said, all we saw was her fighting Imperial Super Commandos. That's what I'm gonna call them because that's what they basically were.
That's what they were.
Yeah. All we saw her fighting was Imperial Super Commandos. She doesn't know she hasn't proved a darn thing to me because those stormtroopers were not Mandalorian, so she would have not cared to just whack their heads in with a hammer, which is what she did. That's just my opinion.
Speaking of people that we still don't really trust in the cast, Axe Wolves. I want to talk about him for a little bit.
My gosh, he was MVP this episode for me though.
He was kind of MVP. He almost had a going down with the ship moment, and he survived it. So I guess he didn't fully go down, sadly. But you know, like Paz Vizsla, rest his soul. He had the I feel the biggest arc this entire this season.
He really went from like he was one of the ones in the Covenant that was like strictly I don't care for Din Djarin, I don't care for Grogu, I don't care for these other Mandalorians that have strayed from the way, I don't care for anybody but who walks the way. And we see him slowly this season. From the start of it, from when they rescued his son Ragnar, that was like the turning point where he's like, "Oh, if they're willing to save my son, if this, then maybe there's worth in helping them." So then you have that, and then you get him agreeing to go down to Mandalore with everyone else. You get it, and then eventually you get him sacrificing his life.
And that was it made me sad, which I used to I used to hate him because he was so against everything for no reason, and he was sacrificing himself and to help. That was like, it was a good character arc, amazing writing. But
It was.
once he fully went through with his arc, it seems like Axe Wolves just came up and filled that void that he left of being that guy that's just against everything.
Because
Go for it.
the way I saw Axe Wolves, especially after as he kind of came more into the fold, I don't think he was a guy that was against everything. Because the way I see it, Paz Vizsla was against everything. That's fair to say, because he was a guy that was stubborn. You know?
Yeah.
He was stubborn mostly because he was sworn to one way for life and just figured that's the way. No pun intended. But that's the way things have to be. And that's what I expect for somebody who is very closed-minded, because then that's the best word to describe it. He's closed-minded. He doesn't experience other walks of life. He doesn't bother to care about other walks of life. When it comes to Axe Wolves, I don't see it as more him being stubborn like how Paz Vizsla was. I see it as more him being tired of the way things have always gone. Because you got to keep in mind, Axe Wolves has been there for the better part of everything since the Purge. So he's seen everything happen. And I feel like at the point that we see him again in season 3 for the first time, where he's leading that fleet and they're basically being mercenaries again, it's kind of like him, for me, saying, it's like him basically saying, that's all we know how to do, on a regular basis. Like, we've tried so much. We've tried to be a strong nation of people. That failed. We tried to fight the Empire. That failed. But the one thing that never fails is just being warriors, essentially. And I feel like as Bo-Katan was trying to reintroduce the idea of rebuilding everything and putting everything back together, Axe Wolves was more, I know how this could end. I don't want to say I don't want to say he knew she was going to fail. But basically, the thing that summed up to me is when in chapter, 22, Guns for Hire, when they fought after they had did the deed for Jack Black and Lizzo.
Shout out
Jack Black and Lizzo. After they did the deed for that moment, they fought, and one of the last thing he said during that duel was it was something along the lines of you'll never be in possession of Darksaber, or you'll never rule with just Darksaber, something along the lines. And it, to me, felt like, he knew what Bo-Katan wanted. He always knew what Bo-Katan wanted. He knew Bo-Katan wanted to rule Mandalore. Now, I'll admit that his idea of what kind of rule she wanted does seem to be a bit murky, because it seems like he thought she just wanted like unlimited power type ruling.
Yeah.
So I will admit that part of it does seem murky, but I feel like he also kind of sees that this is kind of a losing battle, because we've been here before, kind of deal. But that's where I kind of saw with Axe Wolves. But I see where your train of thought is going.
I also think in the same way that I view the armor and how she may feel, Axe Wolves was the leader of these Mandalorians. Then Bo-Katan comes in, wins her battle, instantly becomes leader again. I'd feel a certain way. I'd feel a certain way, if that happened to me.
And you would hate it, and I will admit this is one thing I kind of noticed about both the duels he had with Bo-Katan and with Paz Vizsla. Axe Wolves kind of sucks.
He is not the greatest of fighters.
He kind of sucks, because Paz Vizsla was whooping him, and Bo-Katan was whooping him. And like Bo-Katan, I understood, because I was like, yeah, she knows him, so she probably knows everything he's gonna be doing. Like they've been together for a long time. Paz Vizsla probably just met this man.
Yeah.
Doesn't know his fighting style, and he still was like, get out of my way. I was like, man, I kind of suck.
Yeah, like he was fighting Paz Vizsla, which he's a big guy with a big gun that can take a lot of hits. He's kind of like the stereotypical.
He's a heavy. Yeah, he's the heavy.
So I didn't expect much out of that fight, but he handed Axe Wolves his business. It was over.
I felt
It
so bad
was
for X. That's why I'm happy he at least got to redeem himself, and he was the one who kind of put the final stamp on the what do you call it, the retaking of Mandalore.
yeah.
So I'm happy he got to do that because I'm like, man, you did not have a good run of things
Mhm.
over the course of this season. But like I said, it's interesting to see all that play out. It's interesting to also see, because I also want to talk about this. We saw a lot of connections to the sequel trilogy this season,
We did, and
and
I really liked that, honestly.
I love how we got to see, and like really, we kind of saw it starting in season 2, and it was far more subtle in season 2. Like the way I like because in season 2, it was more. If you pay close attention, you would see the weaponry start to show it. Like for example, in I can't remember what chapter it was, but it was the chapter where Boba first comes in. Where Boba first makes contact with Mando. Let me say it like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, there was a scene where one of the dropships dropped Imperial troops in, and that dropship looked very similar to the first Order dropships we saw in
Yeah,
Force Awakens. So
it
you
did.
start seeing a little bit of it there, but this season it was like far more clearer. You see, Project Necromancy being referenced, which we obviously can assume is the project that brought Palpatine back. We saw the Praetorian Guards make their first appearance, in chronologically speaking.
Yeah. They were
So you're
they
they were
I want to talk about them for a
badass.
second. They were so
bad
cool.
ass.
I love the royal detailing in their helmets. Like they weren't fully the lobster men we know in The Last Jedi, and they
Jeez.
weren't fully the royal guard that we know in from Return of the Jedi. So
There's that good in between.
it was a really good in between, and I really liked it.
I love kind of seeing the evolution of things in Star Wars. That's one of my favorite things, and it springs from a love of concept art. So
Hmm.
and I think you know this more than anyone when it comes to me and my love of concept art in Star Wars. So being able to
Of
see the
course.
evolution, it's like the cool thing of like watching clone phase 1 armor, then to phase 2, then to the TK troopers, into the stormtrooper. It's like that thing of like you
Hmm.
love seeing the evolution. So to see the Praetorian,
It's
so see the Imperial Guard to this phase, I guess we call it like a phase 1 Praetorian, and then
mhm.
eventually we get, and it's kind of crazy because keep in mind we're still almost 30, I think maybe like 25 years until we see them as they are in Last Jedi, because I'm pretty sure this is like what 5-6 years after 6.
Yes, I believe so.
So we're still just over 20 years out from seeing them as we see them in The Last Jedi. So to think
Yeah.
that they've had Praetorian guards for the better part of 20 years,
Mhm.
it's kind of showing you that they are developing rapidly into what we know as the First Order.
They're 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 going really quickly, and it makes me kind of want to see what Armitage Hux has. Like
That
he's
is very interesting.
like they talked as if he has a good amount of forces, building in the out in the unknown regions. I believe they're
So
still building
one
in this
thing
time.
I will note, which is kind of interesting that you bring that up. I'm happy that you brought that up too. So I've read the Aftermath trilogy, which is I don't know if you know about the Aftermath trilogy. I'm pretty sure you do.
I know
Um,
from you talking to me about
yeah.
it. That's about as far as I know.
So the Aftermath, for all those who don't know about the Aftermath trilogy, it was a trilogy of books written. I think they came out 2015 to 2016, around that time period. They're all set after Episode 6, but before Episode 7. And they follow a New Republic team that is tasked with hunting Imperial warlords. Now, to be fair, what happens in the novels, as we found out with Ahsoka in Season 7 of Clone Wars, is not always going to be canon. But there are characters that have shown up in the novels that have shown up in television shows now. The biggest
Yes.
example I want to point people to is a character that showed up in the Aftermath. The Marshal actually showed up in Aftermath first. So that's why I
Hmm.
knew that character before they even really talked about him. So these books, yeah, the events in them might not be canon, but they still hold information that can be referenced. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting, because they harkened me back when you did, and you mentioned Armitage Hux and that situation. I was like, oh gosh, that's what he was doing. In the Aftermath books, he is actually responsible for troops when it came to rebuilding the Empire and the eventual creation of the First Order.
Interesting.
So he was actually responsible for his troops. I think it was his training methods, something along those lines.
That I love the connection of him being responsible for the troops, him bringing up clones and cloning. Like he's also just as interested in Moff Gideon as cloning is. And I think back to Force Awakens, where Hux
Oh,
and
like
Kylo
Kylo,
are
yeah.
arguing, and he goes, "Well, I could bring out the clones again." Like he's standing upon his father's achievement, and I really like that. I really like how he uses it. I really like the connection that we have now between the two generations of Huxes, at least.
That's what I feel like. That's why it's kind of cool. It's cool, but it was also very important that we start building the bridge between the sequel trilogy.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people polarizing topic. It's just it's not a secret.
Yeah.
But I can tell you guys, first and foremost, two of us, we love the sequel trilogy
Mhm.
and we love the stories that are told in it. So to see the bridges now being built and the see, everything finally get an explanation. Because like for the longest time with Rise of Skywalker, which yeah, I don't like Rise of Skywalker. I can say that truthfully though. But the longest thing for Rise of Skywalker is Palpatine just returned. That was the whole idea.
Somehow.
But now we're
Palpatine
getting that
returned.
somehow.
We are.
They're cleaning
It's
that
no
up.
longer a somehow. It's no longer a speech that was given in Fortnite. It's it, it's
It's a
actual
thing. Like we're
story, and I
seeing it,
really like it. Yeah.
and it's
It
and it's sprouting over different characters now, and like again we're seeing it taking different arcs because like it's kind of like what's the word? It's kind of like seeing the Death Star constructed.
yeah.
It's kind of like that. Like you have the Death Star in the first Star Wars, and well, in terms of when it came out, Episode 4, and
Mhm.
you wonder, what did it take to build that? And it took some years, obviously, for that part of the story to develop. But
It's
as it came
like
out,
seeing the plans in episode 2.
exactly, like you're seeing a little snippet because like something like that would have taken ages to get ready. And then
Mhm.
it's the same vein with Palpatine. Something like bringing him back to life would take ages to get ready. But also, it wasn't going to be perfect because, as we've seen with the Death Star project, there's a lot of dissension within the people that are actually supposed to be making it. Like we
Mhm.
know that Tarkin tried to steal the project from Director Krennic, which he eventually did, but he did it by killing Krennic with it. And as we see with the cloning project, Moff Gideon tried to take cloning away from the idea of bringing back Palpatine to clone himself.
It's very interesting to see how the plot holes that were given in between episode 3 and 4 were filled, or episode 2 and 3 were filled in by Clone Wars. And we said, I remember at least being a firm believer that when the sequel trilogy finished, Mando or all the Mandoverse shows would be the reason the plot holes would be filled.
And
And
we're
it
getting
feels
that.
so good to be right. It feels
Is
so good to be right.
I remember you saying that, and it's very good. It's very good to see that fan out. But let's kind of shift gears because I think we've talked a lot
Mhm.
about what season 3 did for Mando, and let's talk about the future. Let's talk about obviously we got Ahsoka. We got season 4 of
Mhm.
Mando possibly on the horizon. We got a host of other New Republic era shows that are coming at some point, and obviously we're capping off with the movie, but we don't want to look out too far ahead because we don't know where things could end up by that point. But let's kind of look into Ahsoka, what we know based on what we've seen in the trailer, what's been talked about since the panel, what's been talked about in interviews and whatnot. We know that we are getting a live action Ezra to a degree. We don't know if we're going to see Ezra, but we know we're seeing like a Rebels era Ezra live action.
Mhm.
We know that Sabine is in possession of his lightsaber. And this is one thing I want people to talk about because I'm like, no one's really pointed this out much. And if you have, I'm sorry, I might have not seen it, but they recreated the last shot of Rebels in live action.
They did. I'm a sucker for recreation of scenes. Like I loved the recreation of the the Night of a Thousand Tears with the Night of a Thousand Tears. I feel like they've shown little snippets of in before, but seeing more than just a small possible flashback, I
Exactly.
really liked. So seeing a recreation of animated Lothal and seeing that exactly put into live action was amazing.
Sick.
The
And like,
the
not only
ships
that,
flying
but-
overhead as well.
yes, it was like just shot for shot. I was like, I saw that and I was like, that's the rebel scene in live action. I was like, that's gonna be. If I swear to you, if that's the opening scene, I'm gonna pop right there. And for people who don't know, and like, why are you guys saying you pop? This is wrestling lingo that we're bleeding into this conversation. We're not going to physically pop. So pop in wrestling terms just mean we cheer and go crazy. Okay.
I
So
don't know. Depending on what it is, I might actually.
I might actually pop.
We could actually physically pop, full of excitement.
Yes. But if you don't understand why we're saying pop, that's why it's wrestling lingo. Basically means we just cheer and go crazy. Why we don't just say we're gonna go crazy? Because we're wrestling fans and we're weird. But
It's hardwired. It's hardwired at this point.
It's just in there. But back to the conversation ahead. Let's just talk about Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ahsoka and the journey that these two characters are on, because they're heading for an intersection, which is interesting because these are both two characters that when they debuted respectively on the Rebels, caused a lot of stir. And Ahsoka's time on Rebels was short-lived for obvious reasons. For people who haven't seen it, spoiler alert. But when she fought Vader in the World Between Worlds, she, as we found out in season 3, was rescued by Ezra at a later point. But she could not show herself because she had to let everyone believe she was dead. So Ahsoka's time in Rebels was very short-lived. She was in a lot of season 2, and then she came back for a short bit in season 4. But she couldn't, like I said, she couldn't show herself because everybody had to think she was dead.
Exactly.
So we never saw Ahsoka and Thrawn actually intersect. Is it possible they've had like some maybe indirect contact over the time that they've been fighting? Yes, because Thrawn's an Imperial Navy officer, and she was fighting with the Rebellion for a long time. Mm-hmm. But we never had them directly intersect. But now, and it's kind of cool to see that happen because of the lines that have been drawn story-wise, that the one thing that connects them is Ezra. This is the way to put it. So we know Ahsoka says she's searching for Thrawn.
Yeah,
it's interesting that she never says she's searching for Ezra.
I think that's just one of ways to kind of make other people think that she doesn't know if Ezra is alive or dead. You know, because if someone that powerful has a chance of still being out there, being a boogeyman to Imperials, I would want to keep that that legend alive, you know?
Yeah. But
that's my way of thinking about it.
Yeah. But also it's kind of interesting to me because that's a lot of hope. And we know rebellion, hope, all this stuff. Yeah. But a lot of hope that Thrawn actually still knows where Ezra is. That's a lot of hope.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because that was the beginning. That was before the Galactic War even officially started, when Ezra was lost to the stars with Thrawn. Mm-hmm. So that's a long time, people, that has passed since Ezra and Thrawn were whisked away by Purrgil. And to hope that Thrawn still has some connection to Ezra is a big hope. And yeah, like I said, Rebels, they offer hope. They love hope. This is what gets them through the day. Is hope and blue milk.
Hope and oats. Hope and oats is what they eat in the morning.
Hope and oats gets them through the morning. Great for them. But it's like, guys, this is serious. This is more than just hope. This is somebody who you haven't seen in ages at this point. Like, a whole war has been fought and ended. Now a shadow war has been. being fought at this point, and
Mhm.
Thrawn's in charge of it. And for me, I'm like, if Thrawn is rebuilding the Empire, if Thrawn is holding together the Empire, what would he need to do with Ezra at that point? You know, like why would Thrawn still be hanging around with Ezra?
I'm just saying, Gideon needed Force users for clones.
You think they're siphoning it from Ezra?
It would help the theory, our already working theory of the real Gideons with Thrawn, and I also feel that a Force users need a teacher no matter what, and Ezra just so possibly happens to be who they have at the time, you know, and he may not know all of it, but he knows enough to get him started.
But what did it harken back? What was it? The clone? Remember, there was actually a clone that was cloned with it. It was in Legends. Was it like X-24, something like that?
There was if you're going by that, it was X20. It's like X. There was two of them. There was two clones.
We're gonna Google this really quickly.
I
Because
remember because it's my favorite game on the PlayStation Portable.
it was clones,
X.
not colonoscopy. Google clones with clones with force. Clone. That's what I was like. Prime clone. I need to find this clone. Oh, I think I'm gonna find it. Okay, no. X1 and X2.
Yes, there. I literally just found it at the exact same time
X1 does not look pretty hot.
from Elite Squadron.
X1 looks very rough. I think X2 was a better one, right?
X2 is the
X2
one
was
that
the
you.
goal.
X2 is the one that you play, I believe. Yeah, so he's the good one. X1 is the one that hunts you down, and you guys,
Yeah.
the ending duel is on Mustafar, which, if a story's good, I guess, but
So that's an instance where a clone was created from a Jedi, but they necessarily didn't need training. But the argument could be made that the reason it kind of worked was because they were cloned from somebody who was a Jedi.
yeah,
So maybe they retained the memories or the muscle memory and the thing.
possibly.
So maybe that's it. And yeah, maybe Ezra is being forced to teach the force sensitive clone. But he'd be able to have to teach it in the dark side, though. Ezra wouldn't be able to teach it. Well,
I mean, all you really need to know is the very basics, and then after that, it's you come upon the dark side.
How do they come upon the dark side? Because that's interesting. Because this is what I explain. I don't know if people know this, but the Sith and their lore in Star Wars, they don't write it down. And that we talk about, like the famous scene in episode 8, the ancient text that Luke was talking about. The Jedi wrote everything down because the idea was to teach. But when the Sith became just the rule of two, the big rule with the Sith was nothing is written down. Everything is to be taught verbally because they didn't want anything getting outside of the Sith. Like I remember, I did a video years ago because the Sith actually have a chosen one prophecy as well called the Sith Ari. Mm-hmm. And the Sith Ari prophecy is never written down. It's only spoken. So the true gist of that prophecy is not really perfectly known. Because, like I said, it's like a game of telephone. You keep saying it so much that eventually some details are going to change.
Exactly.
So with the Sith and Ezra, the idea of the idea of a clone teaching, stumbling upon the dark side is a stretch for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but also it's the same thing. Like if they're trying to clone Palpatine, they wouldn't necessarily need it to what's the word happen upon the dark side. Because, like I said, if we're using X2 and X1 as an example, if they're cloned from somebody who can use the Force, it should be like a muscle memory. They're gonna need a teacher, maybe to
Yeah.
fine tune things. But this is the dark side. I don't feel like you need a teacher to fine tune the dark side.
The dark side is definitely something that becomes happened upon, and it's a self discovery thing. If not being used as a teacher, then ransom in general. Like I
Exactly.
don't think they got to their destination, and then Ezra went one way, Thrawn went another. I don't think so. I do think somehow Thrawn got the upper hand over Ezra, and Thrawn is not going to instantly kill Ezra. I feel,
I don't think
I
he
don't.
killed him. This is what I love though, is there's so many ideas about what happened with Thrawn and Ezra, like
Hmm.
as they're like thrown out into the galaxy. Like I like how the idea is like maybe they still fought, and there's ideas that maybe they just went their separate ways. Because Thrawn, as we know, he didn't really serve the Empire. He just did it because the Chiss wanted him to.
Yeah,
So maybe he just left. But what's interesting is it looks like Thrawn is the glue in the Empire, in the Emperor's plan. I don't want to say the Empire's plan, in the Emperor's plan, because
yeah,
it seems like Project Necromancy is moving forward because Thrawn needs it to move, or at least is the one pushing it forward. That's what's interesting to me. So it looks like that there is much more to the relationship of Grand Admiral Thrawn and Palpatine than we've seen. Now, I note that, as I've mentioned before, I'm reading the Thrawn books now, and I'm currently on the last book in the main Thrawn trilogy, not the Ascendancy trilogy, but the first Thrawn trilogy, the first
hmm
canon Thrawn trilogy. I'm currently in the third and final book of that, and one of the things I've noticed is Thrawn and Palpatine, over the course of all the three of these books so far, they have a very personal relationship. It is not just a thing of like, you know, he's a highly respected admiral, so I'm going to treat him with respect. It's a thing like there's a deep respect for the both of them, like to a point where Palpatine. So I don't. But I've mentioned it before. Thrawn has a Chiss name. I am
yeah.
going to attempt it one time. Myth of Marauders, something like that. Okay, something like that.
I think it's that's a C. That's a C. C is still a
See,
passing grade. So
myth of Marauders. Let me look it up. I just had to look at this.
Mithra Nuodo.
Myth of yeah, that. That's his Chiss name. I'm gonna just every time I'm gonna refer to it, I'm just gonna have you say it. His
All
Chiss
right.
name. Say it.
Mithra Nuodo.
Is like a thing of respect. Palpatine, whenever he sees, say it.
Mithra Nuodo.
Palpatine refers to him as Admiral.
Mithra Nuodo.
There you go. I'm just gonna see how many times I can say it. But Palpatine only refers to him as that name. He doesn't refer to him as his galactic basic name, as you can say. So there's a deep rooted respect, and I feel like part of it is also because Palpatine is so interested in the Chiss. Because one of the things I also found out is, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, or at least I mentioned it to you in one of our conversations, is the Chiss are actually force sensitive individuals.
Yeah.
And in particular, the young girls are possess the ability of the Force. And I've also read now they have very other abilities. They have things like second sight, where they're able to peer into somebody's mind and extract information and use it. So stuff like that would interest the heck out of Palpatine. You have a race of people who are not Jedi, but have abilities that Jedi and Sith don't even comprehend. That's gonna pique your interest.
It reminds me of the legend story of the Outbound Flight, where I'm pretty sure, I'm probably gonna butcher the story because it's been a long time.
That's fair.
But I'm pretty sure they used the Chiss as way seekers, to know how to or they use Jedi at least to navigate the unknown regions, and then once they found the Chiss helped them in that. Also, so I just side note, I just sent you the name.
I saw it.
I want you to try.
We're gonna.
This is Timothy Zahn. This is Timothy Zahn spelling it out. So
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my attempt at saying Grand Admiral Thrawn's true Chiss
Make sure
name.
to remember to roll the R's.
That is not happening.
Try.
I cannot roll my R's, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Mithra no Odu.
We can stick to me saying it. I think
Mithra
that'll
no
work out.
Rodu. Mithra no Rodu. Odu.
It gets better.
So
It
Grand
gets
Admiral
better.
Thrawn is so Grand Admiral Thrawn is
There's our preview.
and Palpatine have a great working relationship. And I feel like that working relationship is the reason Thrawn is attempting to bring Palpatine back to life. Because maybe Thrawn needs Palpatine to get back to the Chiss. Maybe it's something that Chiss owe Palpatine, or maybe it's a deal they worked out. Something is going on very important between the two of them.
One of those things is happening, and it's gonna keep on.
And who knows? Maybe Thrawn served in the First Order.
I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if Thrawn had some hand in starting the First Order. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if starting it out in the unknown regions was his idea. You know, one thing going
the Chiss are.
Exactly. One thing going back to that scene where they show the warlords, I feel like we were missing a very important figure at this time.
Are you referring to what I think of them person?
Ray Sloan. Where was she? Maybe she. I think like maybe because she is confirmed to have a hand in the starting of the First Order. I feel maybe she sent Armitage Hux out as her voice, but I don't know. Like I'm concerned.
Let me actually point this out. So again, don't know if they're going to be considered as still happening. We haven't seen anything. So in the Aftermath books, there's actually a thing that happened with Ray Sloan, and there's another character that I'm actually interested to see if they show up. I can't remember his name. Let me actually pull the number real quick, see if I can rush past it in the meantime while I'm explaining this. But there is this character in the Aftermath books who works for the Empire, and he was a young boy that grew up on Jakku, actually, and he happened to encounter Palpatine during one of Palpatine's like first visits to the world. So yes, Palpatine's been to Jakku before. Anybody wondering? And
sightseeing.
This boy kind of caught Palpatine's attention, and Palpatine kind of sensed this kid wanted more out of life. So
I feel like I remember you telling me about him.
I think I did. I can't remember. I'm trying to find his name. I'm like scrolling. I literally have the novel in my hand, explaining this, trying to like find a chapter where he comes back into the story. But yeah. So Palpatine kind of takes a nested interest in the kid and tells him like, you basically have a very important task.
Mm-hmm.
So over the years, the kid grew up. Was it Rax? I think Rax might have been his name. Rax is coming into my head. I think that might have been his name. I think it was Gallius Rax.
Gallius Rax, yeah.
Yes,
it is.
Gallius Rax.
Yeah. Fierce fighter who could take on even seasoned combatants like Admiral Ray Sloan.
Yes. So Gallius Rax was this character, and Rax obviously knew more. So when one of the things that happened is Ray Sloan, she kind of sees herself as the face of the Empire. Everybody sees her as the face of the Empire. Gallius Rax steps into the scene and kind of says, you know, you're still the face, but I'm the brain. I'm the one that's really running the show. But Ray Sloan kind of takes offense to that. And one of the things that actually happens is Ray Sloan is captured by the New Republic. And the reason being is, I think she was captured. I can't remember the exact stories, but there was this event that happened in the novels. It was a crazy event. It was the attack on Liberation Day. So what Liberation Day in the novel was Han and Chewbacca went to Kashyyyk. They found an old Imperial prison, and they rescued a bunch of Imperial prisoners that were in that prison. And they were all like rebel era soldiers, like this, and it's like New Republic era. So these guys have been in prison since the rebellion. So they've been in prison for a long time, and they've been brought to Chandrilla because at this point, Chandrilla is the prospect capital for the New Republic, and they basically want to do like a big thing. Like, we've rescued these rebellion era heroes. We want to give them their day in the sun, and they kind of parade them and. You know, train just went by Logan's house, and
Space train.
And they parade them, and do what they can. And one of the things that happens is, or that they find out, is these prisoners were secretly microchipped, very similar to the clones of Order 66. These prisoners were secretly microchipped, and when they were activated, they attacked everybody that was there, and even attempted an assassination on Senator Mon Mothma. I think Mon Mothma was actually shot, but she survived. But other people were killed during this attack, and they realized it was the Empire's doing. But Ray Sloan had no clue about this phase of the plan, because she was actually sent to Trangilla by Gallius Rax to kind of show that there was like this very murky united front, or like not united front, but like an acknowledgement about what the Empire has become and what the New Republic has become. So she's there, and this attack starts. So everybody is like, get Ray Sloan. It's her fault. She did this, but she, like I said, she had no clue this happened. This was all part of Gallius Rax's plan, because for him, Ray Sloan was a fall woman the whole time. So it's kind of interesting. For me, I'm waiting to see if Gallius Rax becomes the person that we see, because he was important in the Jakku phase of everything. Because as we know, and that for me is also kind of interesting, because that's one of the big questions we have yet to gotten rather, is what was so important about Jakku.
Maybe it was one of those planets that's somewhat like Dagobah, where it just has a large connection to the Force for some reason.
Maybe, because I feel like that's just an interesting thing. Like, that particular arc of the story has been kind of forgotten. We don't know the true significance of Jakku just yet. We know the Empire went there. We saw it in the novels, but it felt like the novels didn't want to explain it, because it felt like it might have been a topic that would have gotten explained, I guess, in the films at some point.
Yeah.
But obviously they never even went back to Jakku after the first movie, so it's something that I'm hoping, as they kind of close a lot of plot holes that were opened, that's one that they close.
I honestly fully agree with that. This is more your expertise, since you've read the books. I will read them at some point. I have to trust you.
So everyone, I want to say this to anybody who's like saying like, oh, I don't have to read the books. Should I read the books? It's up to you. If it's a thing of, and like I said, I mentioned this a little while earlier. It's a thing of just like with the Ahsoka books, with the Ahsoka novel, I should say. So I read the Ahsoka novel, and I think you've read it as well. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I've read the Ahsoka novel.
Yeah, and we saw, her perspective of Order 66, and it turned out to be a heck of a lot different than what actually happened in season 7.
Yeah.
So we know that parts, but to be fair, I feel like a lot of all the Order 66 stuff was like those preludes and interlude type chapters, but the gist of that story still stayed the same.
Yeah.
So it's a thing of, you can read the novels, because one, at least gives you answers for a while before they give you the concrete. It's like the same thing with George Lucas. I think he said this about the novels when he was still in charge. He said that they're canon until he does something with it.
Yeah.
So that's what it is with the books. That's still the same mindset. They're canon until they do something with it.
Me personally, I recommend reading them. If you like to sit down and read, I recommend reading the books. But it is nowhere near required to know anything about Star Wars, which I feel like is the good part. It's an amazing multimedia franchise that it has a lot of optional readings and playings and watchings, and
it's fun. It's fun, and like I said, for me, it's been really fun, especially as we get like deeper into the new era and the New Republic era storytelling. and seeing facets of the story that I've already kind of gotten privy to, and seeing characters that I've already seen in the books. I'm like, oh, they're making their live action. Like when I saw Armistice Hux show up in this previous season for Mandalorian, I was like, oh my god, I know Armistice because I saw him in the Aftermath books. When I saw the Marshal Cobb Vanth, I was like, oh my god, I saw him in the Aftermath books. So I think it's really cool. And let me tell you right now, for anybody who's read the Thrawn books, I'm gonna drop a name. If Eli Vanto, don't get me wrong, if he's dead, my bad. I haven't finished the third Thrawn book. But if Eli Vanto, this is for all the people who've read Thrawn books, sorry Logan. If Eli Vanto shows up in this show to any degree, that's me popping. Just saying. But going on
Wikipedia to look up Eli Vanto.
Actually, please do. Let's do it together because I no.
Well, no, hold on. There's no spoilers in it. You're good. Okay. It just says born. So,
let me check. I want to know if this man died. But actually, let me take this moment to explain Eli Vanto because maybe he might show up. All right, maybe. Okay, so
go ahead, go for it.
So Eli Vanto is a Imperial officer, and was an Imperial officer, and I don't say was as in he died, but was as because something special happened. So, when Thrawn was first thrust into the Empire, Eli Vanto was kind of also just starting his Imperial career, but he had a little bit of traction in his career. And I like how this turned into like Mandalorian didn't turn into a discussing Thrawn. But he had a little bit of traction in his career. And Eli Vanto was kind of forced to work with Thrawn because when Thrawn first joined the Empire, Thrawn's basic was not good, but he spoke another galactic trade language pretty well, which was I think Sai-Bisti was the name of that language, and Eli Vanto knew that language just enough to at least he could translate for Thrawn whenever somebody was saying something to him. So he was kind of tasked with not only translating for Thrawn, but kind of also helping him teach galactic basics. So when Thrawn was taken to meet Emperor Palpatine for the first time, Eli Vanto was with him. If I'm not mistaken, Vanto actually got to go in the room too. So he got to see Palpatine up close, which for somebody in his career, unheard of. So as Thrawn kind of navigated the Imperial Navy, Eli Vanto was his right-hand man, basically. He was there to help him translate, if anybody needed anything, if he needed any kind of like further help, Vanto was there. But at the same time, Thrawn was kind of nurturing Eli Vanto because Thrawn could see that Eli had a pretty good brain. He was kind of sort of like a prodigy. So as we know, Thrawn is a very good military tactician. He can analyze stuff, and he kind of saw that Eli might have shared the same level of knowledge as him. So Thrawn also kind of nurtured him to have a very similar analytical brain as him. So one of the things that actually happened with Eli Vanto is Eli is sent to the Chiss. Thrawn says, I feel like you could be of great assistance to my people in the Chiss Ascendancy. So I'm going to talk with Palpatine to see if I can get you sent to the Chiss Ascendancy. But no one can know that that's where you were sent. Because one of the things that's very important is no one can know the Chiss exists.
They're
obviously going to know that, yeah. Like, obviously they know they exist because Thrawn's here. But, like, no one can know where the Chiss Ascendancy is. So Palpatine says, okay, I can do that. And Eli Vanto is essentially sent from the Imperial Navy to the Chiss Ascendancy Navy, and he's working under what was her name? I can't remember her name. I just saw her name not so long ago, but it was somebody that was close to Thrawn when Thrawn was in the Chiss Ascendancy. So,
Alani,
yes.
Yeah, because I'm looking at her Wikipedia page right now. I have not read the book, but I will pop if she shows up.
I would say if she shows up, I'm gonna pop. If Eli Vanto shows up, I'm gonna pop because these are two characters that reading the books I'm like very, especially Eli Vanto because Eli, he's really been interesting to a degree of he's kind of like Thrawn's protege. Thrawn took him under his wing and, like I said, sent him off to the Chiss Ascendancy. So he's a human working with the Chiss, and it's kind of crazy because there's actually a story told. So one of the things that they explain with the Chiss in their names is part of their name is like whatever house they belong to, and if they have like 2 syllables, they might not have house. They have 3 syllables, stuff like that. It's basically most Chiss names are 2 or 3 syllables only. But Eli, since he didn't have a house because he's human, he had like a simple name. So I think Aralani basically said everybody will only call you like Eli Vaughn. But people the other chits were like Eli Vaughn too. So another train. So they took his name.
I thought I muted before it could get to us.
It's fine. But they took his name and they essentially made it a chit style name, which is kind of interesting. It was kind of like, oh, but I'm getting off track. But the one thing I want to say about Eli Manto is he's a very essential character to the journey of Thrawn. And if he is still alive, I am really hoping that he can show up over the course of Thrawn and being in this live action phase of the character's career. And I feel like it could happen because I think they've said they're closely working with Timothy Zahn to, make sure Thrawn is captured in his correct essence in a live action setting. And to know that means he's also working with the character who created Eli Vanto. So that's my 2 cents on it. But with that being said, we want to shift some gears just a little bit. We've had a couple of new things hit the market for all you figureheads out there.
Yes.
And our resident figurehead is here to give you guys the deets, as they say.
Ooh, doggy. All right. So there's definitely not as much as what there was when Star Wars Celebration was around, because obviously that's when the floodgates are going to be open. But I feel like there's always something new. At least 2 times a month they have some type of new figure or something small, and we're picking up the pieces from Star Wars Celebration. So right off the bat, I'll go newest and older to older. So we have a Black Series R5, R5 of course being from Mandalorian and also A New Hope. It's in the same vein as the Black Series R2D2 that I talked about last podcast. And it's just it has a couple things that it can do. It looks like the head can pop out like the other R2D2 which was a little weird. And it has little cutters and stuff like that. It's pretty nice. Also, in this little set of news, we have a vintage collection R5, so it's going to be a little bit smaller. May or may not be able to do the same things, but it still looks good. And then also,
like it can do those stuff. As I'm looking at it, looks like it's just your basic astromech figure.
Yeah, in the promo pictures, it's just kind of rolling around. And then they also have a vintage collection Boba Fett. From it looks like mainly his first little Mandalorian appearance with the black Tusken robes and stuff. And I mean, it looks cool. He has a cycler rifle. He has his Totokoa blaster pistol. It's a solid figure. Next, looks like we have a Tusken Warrior and a massive vintage collection. Tusken Warrior being the person that taught Boba Fett how to actually fight like a Tusken. I'd pop for this figure. I don't even collect vintage collection. To use the word of the day, I pop for this figure. This was my favorite character in Book of Boba Fett.
She was awesome. They didn't give her a name.
They didn't. It's just Tusken Warrior, and
oh man.
And it also comes with Massive, the little creepy dog, that everybody cried when it passed. I mean, I cried when all the Tuskens went out. Next up, and the one of the Mando Mania reveals, the little live streams they have showing off what comes out. We have a Pike Trooper from Book of Boba Fett. I mean, it's a solid Pike Trooper. It looks like what it did from Book of Boba Fett. It comes with 2 blasters, a rifle and a pistol, and it just looks solid. It's different, so I'm excited. What I'm even more excited for is Vintage Collection Tusken Raider pack.
Look at those Tuskens, man. Look
with
at those
4
Tuskens.
different Tuskens. 4 different Tuskens. One of them being the Tusken chieftain. So it's a. I think I stick to saying Thrawn's name. You stick to the Tusken noises. For now.
We're gonna give you one day. We're gonna give you guys
One
a
day.
good...
And then
I'm just gonna
next,
put the sound effect over it.
I think that'll work.
Yeah.
Next, something that as of recording this came out today. They revealed a Vintage Collection scout speeder with Grogu from the last episode of The Mandalorian season 1.
Also, by the way, isn't that technically Jason Sudeikis?
This is our first Star Wars Jason Sudeikis figure.
Isn't it technically Jason Sudeikis?
It technically is. It's really cool to get a figure like this, only because we don't really get a lot of figures that are vehicles. And it's obviously it's going to be more expensive. I think it's the website I'm looking at $45. But it's still a cool figure. Comes with little Grogu in the back. I bet you could pose it up so it's hitting the Grogu if you want. Like that episode.
Jason Sudeikis head not included.
Sadly, I bet you could get it somewhere though. And then honestly, the my favorite out of all of these reveals, Fleet Commander Mandalorian.
That was a shocking.
He had a solid maybe minute of screen time, maybe 2 minutes.
It's like that's enough to get a figure.
I'm looking. His armor is really really cool.
He got some clean armor
though. The white helmet, the white faceplate on the helmet with the blue dome. It's just an overall good figure. It looks like it just comes with the one blaster, but I mean,
that's being nice because I don't even know if we saw him with a blaster.
Exactly. I think they're stereotyping Mandalorians here. You know,
guys, we're not
saying they
warriors.
all come with weapons, which they all do, but still,
they do. But still, they like that's
when the armorer got her figure. When the armorer got her figure, they gave her the tools. So, you know, it's something.
It's literally what Jack Black's character said. Like, Mandalorians, they love weapons, don't they?
Exactly. Now to close out the segment, I want to real quick talk about what I want out of figures. Because obviously I want there's so much. I want a trooper. I want one of the Super Commando troopers. They look so cool, especially with the jetpack.
Yes.
Praetorian Guard. Easy get.
Oh my god, yes.
And then we already have one Moff Gideon figure. I literally have it looking at me on my desk right now as I'm talking. I need a new Moff Gideon figure.
You need a final phase Dark Trooper Moff Gideon?
Yeah. I need one because it just looks so cool.
Can we call that final phase Gideon?
It's like a boss fight.
Yeah, we're gonna call it final phase Gideon.
It would work. It works.
But it's a good wrap up, I think. We talked about a lot today.
We did.
We talked about Mando. We talked about Thrawn. We just had an in-depth discussion for Grand Album of Thrawn, basically. Mm-hmm. We just talked about a plethora of stuff. We went for about an hour today, so it's gonna be a little shorter than previous episodes, but that's okay, ladies and gentlemen. That's okay. But with that all being said, we're gonna wrap it up here. This has been episode 2 of Protocol 13. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We're gonna be hopefully doing this bi-weekly. If you didn't see the first episode, go check that out too. But don't go until we're fully wrapped up here, even though we are wrapping up here. So Logan, I want to give you a second if you want to plug anything.
I am writing stuff for YouTube currently, and I am going to be recording music eventually to put on Spotify. So Logan and the Sloths on Instagram if you want to look, and eventually Logan and the Sloths on Spotify. I don't know when or where, but it will happen. And I'll probably start a YouTube channel for my music as well, because exposure like that.
Yeah, it's very important. So, guys,
It
keep an
is.
eye out for that for our good friend Logan and his musical career. If you guys, for the channel side, if you're looking forward to Altered History, episode 3 of the current series is coming soon. I'm gonna aim for Sunday. We might already be out by the time this episode drops, actually. So just be on the lookout for that. But with that all out of the way, we thank you guys for tuning in for this episode of Protocol 13, and we cannot wait for you guys to see the next one. So until then, may the force of others be with you.